Uh, Welcome everybody. My name is Carl Hooker and I will be, I'm excited, super excited to moderate this chat today. It is quite a group that we've assembled in front of us today, and some folks that I've known for a little while, some folks I've known for a long time, and someone that I just met today. So it's a good scope of different presenters that we hope to talk to you guys about today about remote learning. So a little bit about me. First of all, I'm a moderator for this chat, but I also do a lot of other things on the side. I write books from time to time. I'm a DJ. I also MC trivia nights. And also from time to time, I do a lot of educational consulting and lately a ton of public/virtual speaking. So as you guys might imagine, this whole world has been turned upside down in the last few months. And what I'm excited to talk to you guys about today and with this panel is about what does remote learning really look like, and what are some of the things that schools are doing around the country to prepare our kids, our staff, and our communities for remote learning. So what I'll do right now is I'm going to invite our panelists to turn on their cameras as I kind of go through these, and then we'll have them each do their own introduction in just a second. So we have Uwezo Frazier. He is a principal down there in William H. Turner Technical Arts High School in Miami, Florida. Kerry Gallagher, assistant principal of teaching and learning up in St. John's Prep, Danvers, Massachusetts. Don Goble, right there in the center, multimedia instructor from Ladue High School in St. Louis, Missouri, and Nancy Garvey, director of digital learning from Capel ISD in Capel, Texas. So in this group, we have a representation of campus leadership, district leadership, and then classroom teacher, a wide range of people coming from different perspectives. So I'll be very curious to hear their perspectives throughout. At the end, we'll go ahead and share their Twitter handles too. You can see them at the bottom of your screen, but be sure to give them a follow and a shout out as well. And again, if you guys have questions, we have some questions to get us going, but if you have questions that you want to ask our thought leader think tank, please feel free to drop those into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that as well as we go through this presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started. And so as you guys each introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself. I also want you to kind of answer this question, and that is, how are you, first of all, what are your plans for starting school? Because I know that all of you come from different states. So it's going to be different depending on your state and what your school looks like. What do those plans look like? And the second thing I want you to share about yourself is, what is something right now that is keeping you up at night as a leader, as a teacher, about what that start of school is going to look like? And some of you may have already started. I know in Texas, a few schools have, in Georgia, a few schools have, but what is something that's keeping you up at night? So we're going to start. Uwezo, do you want to get us kicked off? We'll get you started.
Hello, panelists and guests and everyone in the virtual world. My name is Uwezo Frazier. I'm a principal in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. This is my 24th year in education, and I love it. It's been a blessing. I love giving back to my community, and I love the grassroots organization that education puts together to sprout young people into the future. This is a noble profession, the best one on earth. So I'm excited and happy to be here on the panel and discussing my personal views, and I hope someone gets something out of it. For me, what keeps me up at night, and sorry for the short introduction, but right now I'm really excited to get into the meat of it. So I'm going to jump right in, and this data for me. I mean, the thing that keeps me up at night is data. So when you talk about kids who've been out since March, some of them struggling students, different socioeconomic levels, different levels of connectivity, and all the different things that COVID has exposed. So from March to now, and you've been out that time, my main concern is data. Where were you before we left for COVID? Where are you now? And where do I need to take you? And what kind of interventions can I put in place remotely? Those are things that keeps me up. It hurts for a kid to be in a struggling situation already. They may have been in a toxic environment already, and you've taken that safety net of school away from them. And now, since we're coming back, we need to get them to some sort of normalcy. And going through data chats and where you are is going to be extreme the first week, or how we're going to intervene and stop the bleeding, and then progress and accelerate the students moving forward. So for me, it's data.
And I'll chime in there and say that you are at Miami-Dade schools, right, Uwezo?
Yes, sir.
There was one of the first school districts I saw when this all started that actually was putting out a lot of good information about what that gap looks like, because this has been the longest spring break we've ever had here in Texas too. You know, they went off on March 13th and they're still on spring break. So I love that you brought that up. That is true. And we'll get into some of that data too. What does that look like? How do we get kids caught back up again? Thank you for joining us from the panel. Kerry, why don't you go next?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Excited to be a part of this. So, as Carl mentioned, I'm assistant principal for teaching and learning at a private school. We have about 1,500 boys enrolled in our school. My role includes professional learning, technology integration, making sure our teachers are aware of the latest research on high quality instructional practices, which right now means high quality remote instructional practices. And I also work as the director of K-12 education for an internet safety nonprofit that's based out of California. So the combination of those roles, I think, has me uniquely positioned to really be aware of the nationwide policy concerns around technology use for students and for children and for families, to keep them healthy, but also to keep them and their data safe. So as you were saying, Uwezo, data, that is always like causes a buzz in my head because of all the different nuances of data and what it means. We're going back with the hybrid model, so 2 days in class, 2 days at home. But when our students are at home, they are attending their classes in a synchronous way. So they will be sort of in the classroom with the students who are there via a bunch of sound bars and cameras and microphones that we are having installed in our classrooms around campus. So we're really fortunate to be able to have that infrastructure being built, and I got to spend my morning testing out some of it in a classroom on campus, so that was super fun. What keeps me up at night, I'm gonna flip the script a little bit here. And I also just want to note again, as you heard about how we're going back, I know how fortunate I am to have the infrastructure that we have. But what keeps me up at night is actually the excitement at the innovations that my teachers are going to come up with that I haven't even thought of. They're going to do some pretty sick stuff with our students. And, you know, they're going to overcome challenges, and there are going to be kids who struggle, just like we saw this fall. And I also am worried about my own children who don't go to my school because they're girls. My school is all boys, and what life is going to look like for them. But in an effort to manage, you know, all of the different anxieties that we have, I try to focus hard on the strength of the educators that I know I work with and how they're going to do some pretty amazing things. And as much as it's my job to prepare them, it's also my job to give them the space to be creative and innovative and do some awesome stuff with our students and serve them well.
Yeah, we've already seen a lot of that innovation just from that quick change through the spring. Teachers have quickly spun up and learned about Zoom and Zoom bombing and virtual backgrounds, a little bit of everything. But then you added another layer to that conversation, which is interesting too going forward, is those of you out there that are listening that are educators, but also having your own kids that you're trying to figure out how do we get them through this too, because they may not go to the same district or same school in your case. That's another challenge we need to think about as we kind of move forward. Nancy, what about you down in Texas there? How's school? What's the plan for getting school started? And then also what's something that keeping you up at night?
Yeah, I think what's keeping me up at night is starting school. So I'm down in Dallas, and we officially should have started school Wednesday, but we pushed it a little bit just to give us a little more prep time. And so school officially starts on Monday, and we are going fully virtual. The state has asked us to go fully virtual until September 8th. So all of our teachers, all of our kids are starting the school year on Monday virtually. And so then on September 8th, we're giving our district, our families choice. And so they had a commitment form due on Wednesday, and they committed to the 9 weeks. So we're doing it like every 9 weeks. We're letting them kind of reevaluate and then commit. And so we are actually looking at kind of a different setup than most of the districts around us, but 70%-ish of our families are looking at virtual and 30% are looking at in-person. So we have a very different kind of setup where a lot of our districts around us are looking at like the opposite of that, 70% coming in and 30% being virtual, and like how do we handle that, and virtual teachers versus face-to-face. And So I would say what's keeping me up at night is helping support our educators through the unknown, which is how many are virtual and how many are face-to-face, and that's going to switch every 9 weeks, and how we keep that going. And really, truly, I agree with you, Kerry, like 100%, our teachers are amazing. And I guess what keeps me up at night is making sure that the structures behind everything is set up for them so that they can be amazing. They're not worried about the technical side of things. They're not worried about like those kind of things, that they know they have someone to go to. They know they can be the people that they need to be, and that they can be innovative. And so I guess that's what it kept me up late last night, is just making sure that those structures are ready for them so that they don't have to think about it, and they can really think about learning and design with their kids.
It's funny how regionally different schools are starting different ways. You know, in Florida, we see one method. In Massachusetts, I've heard a lot of friends of mine up there talk about the hybrid method that Kerry was just talking about. I'm in Texas, just like you, Nancy, and we're seeing, depending on state leadership in some ways too, that really affects kind of what the model is that we have going forward. And if you have a state that has strong leadership and is really giving that direction, that's great. And some states don't have that. So that's also added another thing. But you're right, man, teachers are really well versed at pivoting at this point. This will be a very, very interesting year. Speaking of teachers, Dawn, you're representing the teachers for the entire country on this panel, so no pressure. But tell us a little bit about you, what your start of school is going to look like, and then also what's something that's keeping you up at night.
Sure. Thank you very much, Carl, for having me. Great to hear all these different perspectives. I am a classroom teacher. I've been in the classroom for 18 years. Teaching's my third career, so I bring some business kind of to the production of my classroom. We are starting out 100% virtual, K through 12, and we will reevaluate after 9 weeks. And I have to say that I sleep well. There's nothing keeping, now I have a lot of concerns, none of which keep me up, because I really try to calm myself so I can get that sleep, because I know the next day is going to be chaotic. A few things that concern me, because I teach at the high school level, and kids are going to be taking 7 online courses. And I'm also a university professor. I've taught at Loyola University in New Orleans for the last 2 summers. And most of the time, the kids that take online courses, they take 1 or 2 at a time. Right. We have kids that are going to be taking 7 online courses. And I worry about what happened in the spring is that they were inundated with notifications and emails from Google Classroom that were overwhelming. I saw it firsthand with my son, who was in 8th grade. And so another concern is my son is a freshman now at my high school. So he's transitioning into becoming a high school student, and he won't be around his friends or have that initial high school experience. Plus he has, he's on a 504, so he needs additional support. So that's concerning. I have concerns about how in the spring, teachers were heroes. And now we've had a lot of dissension and division between parents and leaders, state leaders, of going back and forth, you know, whether it should be virtual or hybrid. And the teacher unions, you know, forced the hand of district superintendents to go virtual. And while I believe we have tremendous parent support in our community, there is division. And around the St. Louis area and the surrounding communities, I'm in St. Louis County, which our cases continue to rise. We've been one of the hot spots the last month due to some real negligence. You know, I don't, if you've seen virtual photos from Lake of the Ozarks, which is in Missouri, and big time partying and no masks, and bars open. And then we had a 4th of July that it kind of, you know, so that was Memorial Day, 4th of July. They didn't really learn some lessons. And so people will visit like Lake of the Ozarks a few hours away from St. Louis and come back, and they bring that in. And so kind of the people traveling back and forth, you know, I worry about that. The other thing I worry about, so while we're virtual, our teachers are being asked to teach from their classroom and teach Zoom from their classroom. And while there'll be minimal people in the building, there'll still be a few hundred people in the building sharing spaces and bathrooms and common areas to heat up food for lunch. And so, you know, I worry a little bit about that. I worry about the perception of why teachers can't teach remotely from home and why they must be in the building. And for some teachers, they have more resources in their classroom, and that might make a ton of sense. So I wish there were more of an option for teachers to kind of choose. And then of course, you know, so now with my, you know, going back to my son and all the other kids who are left at home that every parent is worried about going back to work, and there are kids now learning at home, you know, the screen time. And
Yeah.
because we're set up where classes will be scheduled as they were in person, but via Zoom. Now we're shortening those. And one thing that I really love, we're adding in a lot of virtual support. So on Mondays, it's an all virtual day, no class instruction. Students can schedule times with their teachers and get extra help, work on projects. That's when they could Zoom with friends in other classes to work on things. I love that model. We're also not starting class until 10 a.m. to allow our teenagers, A, to sleep in a little bit, or we are up, teachers are available by 7:30 so that if kids want to get personal one-on-one help, and I'll leave it at this. So I taught a virtual journalism camp this summer, workshop, and we used this model. We did a little instruction, and then I had an open Zoom for 3 hours every afternoon, and kids would just pop in whenever they needed help. And I have to tell you, there was more one-on-one instruction and deeper instruction sometimes, maybe than there even was when I was in person.
Yeah.
So there's challenges with it, but there were also some real advantages. So I'm not losing sleep over it. I have a ton of concerns, but I'm ready to go. Like this is not new for me, and I'm happy to support teachers who need that support. And I hope I can share some ideas today that will give some guidance or strategies, a very kind of tactician approach to actually implement.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, and I saw the panel was agreeing with some of that too. Uwezo, did you want to jump in? Do you have another comment to add on to Don?
I did. Don, great commentary. As a principal, it kind of, some of the things really hit from your perspective that I wanted to speak to. So here in Dade County, we're virtual until September 30th, and we're going to reevaluate, reassess, and we're going to make a decision on October 5th if we're going back or not. So that brings me to normalcy. The normalcy or the authentic experience of education for our kids. And my building, I made it optional. You can come to school and use the resources if you so choose and quarantine in your room, or you can stay home if you have young kids or you have extended family members that you're caring for, or you have circumstances yourself, then you're allowed to stay home and teach from home. But how authentic is the experience? So we have a platform that we're using, and a couple different platforms. Bulb is one. And so you go in, and now how do you authenticate the experience of a day? As far as dress code, as far as time management, as far as cameras on, you know,
Right.
those just something as simple as the teacher turning their camera on and the students having their cameras on as well, to get the authentic experience. So if you're looking at a picture, the teacher has a picture, or we're in a situation where it's death by ditto. So like we need to have a situation that's authentic. So how do you provide that authentic experience from home is the question, and how can it be done? I'm asking from my perspective, how would you be able to bring that sort of authenticity from home?
Anybody on the panel want to take that one about that idea of authenticity and like bringing that classroom experience? I mean, I've seen lots of little tools and techniques. I don't know if they're super effective. Like a good friend of mine, her name is Kathy. She's Kathy Yanka. I know Don knows her. She did something interesting where she just took a picture. Her background was just her classroom, even though she was at home. And it just kind of let the kids know that when you do come back to class, when we get to that point where you can come back to class, I want you to be familiar, like even that little touch, that little bit of extra touch gave them a little bit of that feeling. But you're right, you kind of have to mimic it, right, in some ways, Uwezo. And I think that's a challenge. Anybody else Don, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, so I think there are new authentic ways that we can kind of make the world our classroom. And so, you know, when I'm tied into a specific part of my building, when we're in person, you know, I have a great learning center, an amazing virtual media learning center. But, you know, I hope teachers will offer projects for kids to like get outside, look at their house a little different. We're not at stay-at-home orders, so we could actually use the world as our learning space, as our learning environment. And my hope is that math teachers will take, you know, addresses on doors or street signs, and science will get outside and explore the environment. And there's ways I think that we can do that. And so, and for me, I teach media production. So I'm going to get my kids out. I'm not going to sit there and lecture for 50 minutes. I'm going to talk for a few minutes and then be like, okay, turn off your camera and go around your house and find, you know, some things that make sense to the lesson that we're learning. And so while it's not in the classroom, I think there's a way that we can kind of revolutionize a little bit a new authentic way of learning. And I think kids might appreciate that. And the other thing I'll mention is this. There's been a lot of talk about how school is the safe place for a student. And in many cases, it is. But I have to say that some of the struggling students that I worried about in the spring excelled virtually because it was on their time. It was on their schedule. They were not being bullied. They were not being made fun of. They didn't feel uncomfortable in a class full of 30 kids where they couldn't speak up. And so now I can ask a student in the privacy of their own home to record an audio or a video. What did you learn today? What were 3 things that you learned? And I can almost have a one-on-one conversation with that student and hear back from them instead of them kind of burying themselves in the back of the classroom and hiding when they don't want to talk because school is an intimidating place for them. So I'm looking at it from both sides that way, and I'm looking at it as a new authentic way of learning.
I will jump in and say, 100% agree with Don on that thing that also some teachers are also excelling in this environment, which is a unique thing in some ways. But like my oldest daughter, who's a 5th grader, got all of her work Monday of the week, and she was through her week's worth of work by Tuesday. And it was that asynchronous model back in the spring. So she's like on board, and she's that quiet kid, Don, who won't speak up. She's scared to death to say anything in class, but now she's starting to speak up. Nancy, you want to jump in on that idea of authentic experience?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've talked a lot about with authentic learning is connecting the kids to each other. And so like we've been really talking about ways to use, we purchased Zoom and are talking about using like the breakout rooms and like really finding ways for the kids to talk to each other. And even talking about when we get back to like the hybrid model of some kids are with us face to face and some kids are home, making sure that we're not making that 2 separate learning experiences and that the kids can talk to each other in their classrooms, kind of like what Kerry was talking about, like having like all that, we won't have all that stuff, but finding ways to create breakout rooms in Zoom where some kids are face to face and some kids are at home, and making sure they are still talking to each other. And it's not just like delivery of content or sharing what you know, which is good, but also talking about what you know to each other. And so we don't have all the answers yet of like how to do that, but that's a big conversation, is how do we get our kids to be able to talk to each other and to be able to connect with each other no matter where they are, and whether that's a breakout room or a small mini lesson, and really make sure their voices are talking to each other and in that sense. So I think authentically, that's what can happen in a classroom. They can stop and they can have those like chats and Socratic seminars. How do we keep that going digitally and make sure that our kids are connected to each other and not feeling like they're the outsider at home and stuff like that? So because we will have kids in both scenarios. That's where our conversation has led to.
And one of the more unique things I heard, I think it was Eric Butash in Rhode Island who's doing this in his schools, where he's basically setting up these little microphone pods on desks. So if there are kids that are remote, they can still listen into conversations and feel a part of that table. And then they can also respond and such. So they kind of feel a little bit more involved in the classroom, but not all of us have that access to tools. Kerry, do you want to jump in on this idea of authenticity?
Yeah. And I just wanted to really drive home the point that you brought up there, Nancy, about their ability to connect with one another. I mean, I think we know that the best indicator of a child's success in academics is that child's authentic, high quality relationship with their teacher. So none of this that we're experiencing is going to replace a high quality teacher, not even for a second. And when school leaders are really driving home that point with their teachers and explaining that of all the things that we're investing in to make this work, investing in you as the teacher is the most important thing that we can do, I think, so that our students are successful. I think that's important. Also, I mean, as I mentioned, I know we're lucky to have some of the technology that we have at my school, but when it comes down to it, you don't really need the technology to get the kids connected. What you need is, a genuine interest in your students, an opportunity for the students to share who they really are, their true identity, with one another, and create a safe space. Just like we've spent, decades and centuries creating safe spaces in our classrooms, we need to do the same thing in our online classrooms. The online classroom is a place, just like the physical classroom is a place. And I'm nothing if not a research nerd. It's built into my role to do the research and then share it out. And I've been doing a lot of digging lately on the community of inquiry framework, which is based in the work of, surprise, surprise, John Dewey, like going all the way back, right? It's just we're updating it to remote learning, and we're talking about strategies to create a safe space in an online classroom. So what does it look like on your online classroom landing page? How are you welcoming students? How are you allowing them not just to get to know you, but to share themselves with each other? How are you teaching them how to give one another positive feedback so that they can build trust as a community? We do all these things sort of second nature in our physical classrooms. We can do it in our online classrooms. It doesn't even take a Zoom, although a Zoom is a great opportunity to do it because you can see faces, but it can be done in lots of other ways with free tools. Students can share audio, they can share video, they can share even just a little text, finishing a sentence starter for our youngest students, and maybe something a little more detailed for our older students. So there's just so many opportunities with all the different tools that are out there for them to share a little bit of who they are.
And I hear a lot from what all of you are saying is there's that connection, that relationship piece that needs to be built early on and then continue throughout. I think a lot of times I see this a lot now, like all these ways you can build relationships virtually at the beginning of the year, but I think it's important to know that that doesn't stop at the beginning of the year. It's continual and ongoing. And in the chat, there's lots of great examples. People are talking about the Bitmoji classrooms, where you can about me using Bitmojis and different ways you can have, different Zoom backgrounds that talk about themselves. Uwezo, do you want to wrap this one up? Because I want to get to another question, but do you have one more final point on this and we'll put a bow on it?
Oh yeah, just quickly, I just wanted to give kudos to the panel. I'm taking notes too. So I'm involved. I'm asking questions, answering questions, and I just took away from what you guys were saying, the physical proximity to engage is really important in school. And so how to bring that virtually, I took a note about that and the competitive edge, competition to achieve. And that's something that's really critical in a brick and mortar institution. So I want to bring that virtually too. So it was a great conversation. Thank you.
And I'll add a little bit more to this too, because I know that Dawn was talking earlier about, the notifications and the idea of, there's all these new things that kids are experiencing and teachers are experiencing too. And so I want to switch to this next one, Dawn. I know you want to jump in there too. I'm going to jump to this next question real quick, and then you can start us off, Dawn, because this is actually more of a Kerry question, but I don't want her to answer first, because then we'll all be like, yeah, we agree. So, digital citizenship is now being rethought. I mean, we've always had this. Those of you that have been in the field for a while know that we need to talk to our kids about what kind of norms and strategies do we have. But now that it's remote, there's a kind of a new set. And I've seen some stuff going out there. I don't know if you've been online the last couple of weeks. We all have been. Who am I kidding? But there's all these like little, kind of infographics about best ways to do this in a remote classroom. So Don, I'm going to let you get started with your point that you're about to make, and then also kind of go into this. What are some of those strategies? What are those norms you see as a teacher in terms of like when you get your kids started on that remote learning?
Sure. So real quick, one thing I wanted to mention, there are two main, well, maybe three, about the authentic learning. One of the things that I love that our district is incorporating are learning centers. So for kids that have special needs, special learning needs, disabilities, whatever the case may be, they will have opportunities to meet with teachers in person, socially distanced and at different times. So, even though we're 100% virtual, there will be opportunities for kids still to come in and meet with teachers. I'm even thinking about trying to find ways to create like small pods to meet with my students, maybe individually, like once a week, and rotate that time. And so I love that part about my district, that we are going to be offering some opportunities for some in person. Again, since we're not stay at home, there's creative ways I think that we can do that, especially to support kids that have those special needs or extra needs, for learning. And the other piece we haven't talked about yet, and this will lead into maybe my digital citizenship, but it's that social emotional piece that is so important. And you talked about relationships. I worry about that on the beginning, because in the fall or the spring, we had already had some kind of relationship with our students. And now we're going to be starting, or at least, most of us, with brand new students. And it's hard to build that relationship, I think, virtually. But there are ways of doing it, and video is one great way of doing it. I can share later. And that could be that example. So like a student creating a video about themselves, who they are, where they're from, where they live, what they love, who they love, what they do. And there's so many different video platforms. Like having a student, I do this anyway. I do this in the physical classroom. I've done it for 8 years. But having a student share that about themselves, suddenly now I can learn, and the students in the class can learn a lot about that individual in a short 1 minute, video, or 35-second or 45 or 90-second video to build that relationship. And now we take that video, and depending upon the age, we can publish that. And I have students create digital portfolios and publish that to the web. And now we can maybe comment on those videos as well, what we liked about it, what we wondered about it. And now suddenly we're, through the act of doing and getting that feedback, we are teaching digital citizenship. Because guess what the next thing is that we'll do? I will take a few of those and I'll ask students for their permission, and I'll blast it on social media. I'll say, look at some of these amazing students that I have. And then suddenly their page will get views, and they'll get comments from Kerry in Boston and Nancy in Texas and Uwezo in Miami. And they'll be like, why are these people from all over the country commenting? And I'll be like, because I posted it on social media. And look at the great feedback that I'm getting, and look at the power and reach of the voice. And now I may ask you to do the same thing. And some may say, well, I don't want to do social media. I'm not about that. And that's okay, because then I can do it for them and then give them that feedback from the great professional learning network that I'm a part of here with you all and others, and say, look at the people who are looking at your work and look at the reach. I will never forget, the most quiet student in my class was the loudest on her blog. And she came running into my class saying, Mr. Goble, I got a comment from Australia. Why is someone in Australia reading my blog? And I said, well, because it's a good blog, and I decided to share it. And they clearly thought something, good enough to respond back to you. And so by giving these authentic, real world experiences for kids to see how far reaching, suddenly the light bulb goes off, and they might start making some different personal choices about what they do. And so I love teaching digital citizenship through doing and encouraging public posting, again, depending upon the age and maybe in a curated environment, but even if it's a private environment, giving kids that publishing process, even if it's curated through Schoology or Google Classroom, or I use a site called schooltube.com where you can do a private, but you're giving them that publishing experience. Suddenly now they are learning, and they're seeing how far reaching they possibly can go.
So I'm going to make my next TikTok video public now. You just inspired me, Don.
Good.
It's an 8-second dance move. No, I'm not going to do that.
Can't wait.
I don't want to punish you guys that way. What about the rest of you in terms of that idea that digital citizenship? I mean, it's always been there and it's ever present, but now that we have this kind of, a lot of you were talking a little bit about like cameras on, cameras off. I mean, are there some best practices that you're seeing or hearing that your staff are sharing or talking about? Uwezo, do you want to go on this one?
Absolutely. Well, I'll hold off on the digital citizenship. I want to hear from Kerry. I'm looking forward to her response, but I do want to speak to the norms.
Yeah.
And the norms for me, once you go virtual and you're remote, the instructional framework has to change. There's different components of a lesson that people usually get into, especially highly proficient and highly effective teachers. But now that needs to be streamlined because of the platform that you're in. For instance, we spoke today in the leadership meeting about an opening, independent practice, and then coming back to close the lesson in 3 30-minute sessions, and different things like that. But the norm, multiple choice and how we assess needs to change in this environment. And we spoke about written form, doing things in written form, presenting things on bulb, hands-on activities. For instance, if we're in science, you're talking claim, evidence, reasoning. You're in social studies, you're talking reference and research, and you're writing. You're talking math, you're talking applications and word problems, you're talking English. Now you're writing to defend the position. And now I think that you're away, the norms must incorporate writing. This is a tool that has to, students are very savvy, smart. They can get answers, they can get information from anywhere at the drop of a dime. So now how do you truly assess what they're doing if they're not writing authentically to you? And so for a norm, for me, is changing the framework and streamlining the framework while we're away, but also incorporating writing in every discipline to make sure kids are really internalizing new information, and we're reinforcing older information that they can internalize and receive.
I like that idea, and it kind of piggybacks on what Don was saying of the let's keep it authentic, let's keep it real. Let's not do a lesson just about digital citizenship. Let's actually build those norms and strategies into an active lesson that has academics involved in it too, where we're having them process through writing or reading or blogging. Before I give the director of K-12 Connect Safely a chance to respond to this, Nancy, do you want to add one little thing? Because we keep setting her up on a tee. Kerry, you better just crush us with whatever your answer, because Nancy's going next. Yeah, race her up. Okay, yeah, Nancy, so go ahead.
I won't talk too long. I was just thinking about a different perspective that I might share to this, which is a conversation that I may have had just recently with a kindergarten teacher who is coming into this thinking about, well, do you know how I spent my first 2 weeks of school normally? Is just teaching kids how to be kids in school. Because in kindergarten, they're coming in for the first time learning how to do school. And so it kind of reflects back to like digital citizenship. When I talk about it with teachers and other people, digital citizenship is just citizenship online. And so when we talk about, you know, like these workflows and these things that are happening, our kindergarten teachers are doubly in a scenario where they're not only teaching online scenarios and how to be in a classroom, they're literally teaching this is how learning happens, because we're coming from 4-year-olds who were in daycare, maybe not in daycare, maybe stayed home, and this might be their very first experience learning at all. And so we talked a lot about the norms and a lot about like, okay, so when you're home or when you're at school, you talk about norms, like how do you go to lunch? How do you sit at the lunch table? How do you do all these things? And so there are things that you don't even think about that kids need to learn how to do. How do you walk in a straight line? But like those things will happen when we get back in person. But now they have to flip their thinking in, how do you learn? And like, how do you sit still and really talk about how do you raise your hand? How do you do that online? And I think they're in a kind of an interesting piece here because they're not having to retrain kids. They're literally starting out the year. And so when I think about Zoom best practices and classroom workflows and stuff like that, my perspective is K-12. And so you have to think about your kindergarten babies and how they're going to do this and what's appropriately developmentally online and what you should be doing in like tactile and paper, and how do you show evidence versus how do you sit on a Zoom and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there as like something to think about too. Is I can't wait to hear Kerry talk about this stuff too, but I'm just wanted to talk about like the really digital citizenship is citizenship, and like how do you just reframe like how you're going to teach in your classroom, what things are you going to use, and then just be able to spend time learning and teaching them what that's going to look like all year, and actually getting their feedback too. How would you like this to look? How can you help the class do these things or those kind of things? So that's just what I wanted to throw in, because I think that kindergarten perspective is really interesting in online learning.
Yeah, and there's a lot, and it's interesting because in the chat people were saying like, I can't imagine being a kindergartner right now. And I do want to point out one thing that I've been talking to some of the parents in my community about, because they're like, they're going to be sitting on this Zoom call the whole time. I was like, wait a minute, stop your words right there. They don't have to sit. I mean, you could put it up on a shelf. I mean, you don't have to have a raising desk or anything, because a lot of kids don't have that. I mean, you just put the device somewhere where they could stand up. A lot of my daughter's first grade classes, most of it, she was upside down in the Zoom call pretty much the entire time, like you see on the commercials these days. So I do also want to give a shout out to Bruce before we kick it over to Kerry for the home run here. And that is that he did share a Wakelet in there that has a ton of those resources. So thank you so much, Bruce, for sharing that. Those infographics that are coming out now, again, like Don was saying, social media is powerful, man. Let's use this together, right? The community is better as a whole. There's the smartest person in the room is the room. And in this case, it's a big room. Kerry, you want to go on that point and finish this up about digital citizenship norms and everything else? We're waiting on bated breath.
All right, I'm going to it's going to be pure gold. All right, are we ready? So I would say, I think what you kind of hinted at, Uwezo, about the norms, this is a huge opportunity for us as educators to really shape what online culture is going to look like from here on out, right? This isn't just about, making sure that students know how to behave when they're in our virtual class. This is going to shape the future of how learning happens for everyone forever, right? So there has been online learning and there has been in-person learning, but they have largely been viewed as separate adventures in, growth and maturity. And online learning has been reserved really for, undergraduate and graduate studies, with some exceptions. Now, from here on out, that's going to change. So it's changed this year because we have to, but it's going to be changed for the future. So this isn't just about making sure that our children are healthy now. This is shaping how our children are going to learn and interact with each other from here on out. So we need to look at that from a positive mindset and say, we are the generation that gets to shape this. So let's do it right. Let's not just do it with an emergency mindset. Let's do it with a responsible mindset. It starts with norms. It starts with, how do we express ourselves? We are going to make sure that everyone is really great at writing if you're in Uwezo's district. We are going to make sure that everyone knows how to demonstrate to their teacher that they're ready to start class. If you're in Nancy's district, we're going to go back to what we've learned in kindergarten and take the time to teach kids how to learn, not just what to learn. That's really essential. We've worked really hard over this summer to craft some norms for participating in our class, whether you're in person or remote, because we're going to have students doing those at the same time. And so we want them to be able to interact with each other. So we've thought very carefully about that, and we're rolling out those norms with our students and teachers and parents in the coming weeks. But beyond that, this is a much bigger conversation, because I actually think digital citizenship is an outdated term, and that the term that we should be talking about and using is digital wellness, because it's not just about your duty as a citizen. It's also about how are you balancing and caring for yourself so that you can therefore care for others. So that means, how much time are you spending on screen versus how much you're spending sleeping? Where are the screens in your house, and when are you allowing yourself to be away from them in addition to when you're on them? And when you are on screens, how are you choosing to use that time? Are you interacting with other people like we are right now in a very active social way? Or are you binge watching Netflix, which, by the way, I can get behind. Binge watching Netflix is fine, as long as you have created balance in other parts of your life, right?
Gotcha.
So I think that's the key, that let's not measure screen time in minutes. Let's measure our screen time in the quality of our overall life experience, our relationships, our interactions. Oh, I'm getting hands. I love it. So, and let's not get caught up in the numbers of the time. Let's really start talking about the quality of the people that we're interacting with, the tasks that we're completing, and whether what we are doing is making a difference in someone else's life. Because we use the technology, the world is better, right? That's how we measure our digital wellness. I hope I met expectations.
That was good. That's a mind blown, mic dropping. You also just destroyed my next question, which was, Kerry, what's the right amount of minutes that a kid needs to be on a screen? But I'm not going to go there, because I think you hit it on the head. I think the balance is the key point. And I think a lot of you have mentioned kind of that idea of those little breaks throughout. So I'm not going to belabor that too much. I'm going to pivot to something else, but I do think you're right on point there. It is that balance, right? That idea of when kids at different ages are going to be different. And also, by the way, not every kindergarten kid is the same. Some kids can handle it and some kids can't. So you got to differentiate for them too. And a lot of people are mentioning in the chat. Speaking of norms, I'll just mention this in the chat. Make sure you guys that are in the chat are saying all panelists and attendees so we can see all your responses. We've seen a lot of great responses to the panelists, and maybe that's fine if you want to do that, but you can also select all panelists and attendees so we can all see what you're sharing in there. So again, norm strategies, we're still learning, right, in a lot of ways. Speaking of learning, let me go to this next question here. And this is really more about staff and professional learning. And so how are you, and for Dawn, this could be different for you because you're actually receiving some of this too, but what are some things you're doing to prepare yourself or your staff for what this next phase looks like? It's some of you, it's already starting. Nancy, it's starting, ASAP. Some of you, you've got a little bit more time. We've pushed out a little bit longer. So what are some things you've been doing over the last few months? Because when that happened, we kind of just said, good luck, everybody, turn on a Zoom and send out a digital worksheet and we'll see if we can figure it out. So what are some tools, some tricks, some techniques, some things you're doing to prepare your staff for what's coming and what will be definitely a mixed or virtual or hybrid, whatever word you want to use, fall? And we'll let, who wants to start with this one? Let me see. Nancy, you want to go? Go ahead.
Sure, happy to start because yeah, we're right in the middle of it. I think the thing that everyone knows is that everybody's on a different digital learning journey. Not everybody is in the same place when they started COVID, before COVID, pre-COVID, now that they've been working and trying to figure everything out. And so what we try to do is really offer as much professional learning as we could in an asynchronous manner and made it available as soon as school ended. So like we made sure that we had all of our learning management information out for them to start beginning to learn. We made sure that we took all of our webinars from the spring that we were doing on the fly and going and recorded everything and put those in a space where the teachers could find them if they needed them. We created a learning library that had basically everything that we could think about that they might need in a space where they could search for it and find what they needed. Because we have found that everybody's in a different place and has different questions. And so we wanted to give them that basis, like you go and learn what you need to learn, but then we're also opening up lots of help areas and Zooms and questions and coffees and spaces open for teachers to work. And then our district has 12 digital learning coaches that are separated by grade level bands this year, or last year and this year. And we've given them like their teachers access to those digital learning coaches. And we've created like a collaborative space where all of the grade band for our district is in one space where they talk to each other. And we did that purposefully because I don't think that the digital learning coach is the only expert in the room. And I think that, like I said before, they're all on a different learning journey. And so there are teachers out there that can answer some of the same questions that a digital learning coach could. And so we put them all in a space. And then if a digital learning coach can answer and they're not meeting with a team or they're not doing something, they're absolutely going in and answering every question that comes in. But then if they're not available in that hour, the other teachers are coming in and seeing those questions and being like, oh, I just did that in my classroom, let's get going. And so I think my job was to connect the teachers to each other and to give them the basics of support that they needed, and then offer individualized in either one-to-one or team to a digital learning coach opportunities to talk through what's going on, because every grade level, every content area has different needs. And so we were trying our very best to figure out how do we help people as they need it, because right now we feel like the best support for them is just in time, because they're trying to design their learning. They're trying to figure out what this looks like for kindergarten. They're trying to figure out what it looks like in high school, and that kids that have been doing this for a long time. I mean, there's just so many figuring out that we try to find that way to make it as individualized as possible. And also not to leave anybody out, and to check in and make sure people are connecting with each other.
I want to point out something you just said, because it sounded very much similar to some of the things a lot of you have said about what we do with students. And that idea that giving them opportunity for one-on-one, giving them opportunity to connect and collaborate, those are the same things we talk about with students. So it's important to also think about that with our staff, right? And so I always hated that as someone who gave professional development, saying like, hey guys, don't let your kids just sit for 6 hours and listen to me talk, and then I'm going to make you sit for 6 hours and listen to me talk. So modeling that same behavior, I like that, Nancy, that you pulled that in there. Uwezo, what about you? How are you helping your staff there in Florida get ready for this?
All right, so we're in contrast. We haven't started yet. We start on August 31st. So we have a week of professional development from August 20th until August 26th to prepare and get parents prepared. But what we did, we went and we did a survey and thought about what were the things that stopped students from achieving in March. Like what are the top things that happened during COVID? And so one of them, I'm gonna go through them. One of them was no access. So no access. The kid didn't have a device, or if they did have a device, there's one device and there's 4, 5 siblings in the home, so you don't have the opportunity to have that personal device. One of the issues that we saw were parents who were essential workers who had to go and work. They didn't have the opportunity to stay home and guide the child. So that was a barrier. We have very competitive kids, so there were no grading incentives, no competition. Like we spoke about earlier, we had a number of kids that had to take care of siblings. You're in 12th grade or you're in 11th grade, 10th grade, and now you have a sibling in elementary school. So you're trying to help them and help yourself. Some individuals had bedlam in the home. I can't think of another word, but the home was chaotic. They didn't have a space to work, a designated area to work, and then student-teacher relationship was the biggest one out of all of them. Like, how do I feel about my teacher? If I have a negative relationship with my teacher during school, when we're online, do I want to log on and see this person virtually? So that was an issue as well. And then down here, we had the language barrier as well. With the ESOL strategies, we have a large ESOL population here. And so that was a barrier as well. And so what we're trying to do is first do the survey and talk about the barriers that existed. And now we want to work around those barriers or figure out a way to create a product that counters some of the things that students are going to be going through to try to make a smooth transition into this thing. So there's a lot of social emotional issues taking place, a lot of operational issues taking place that people rarely think about, especially in some of our communities. So we need to brief teachers on that. We need to make people aware of that before we even begin putting the platform in place. How do we support kids through this? So that wellness and putting systems in place for them to be successful is really important. So we're starting with the survey and we're going through this before we go the academic route.
Yeah, I hear that the Maslow's over Bloom's, I've seen that a lot, kind of making the rounds too, like making sure you support them as learners and get over those roadblocks. I also love that you brought in your staff and asked them for those questions. I see a lot of times, decisions are made, and sometimes it has to happen where you just make a decision and go with it. But those districts that seem to be pulling in staff and asking them for what are the roadblocks and hurdles, those seem to be the ones that are more successful going forward. Don, as a teacher in this fight here, how are you kind of overcoming all this? What are you doing for your own training? But also, I heard you say earlier you're supporting other teachers as well.
Yeah, it's been a busy summer. So basically what I've done is I took a lot of the process and workflow that I've used for online teaching for university students, and I try to translate that for K-12 environments. So I've done a lot of professional development, offering that to different districts. And I can share that resource. I have a resource I can share out here in the chat in a moment. But I have to give kudos to our district, Dr. Amy Zielinski, who's our curriculum and instruction superintendent. She and our professional development team created webinars all summer. And I know other districts have done this all summer. Teachers have been working. We've not been on vacation. Trust me, we've been not only either preparing physically moving things out of our classrooms to sitting and learning and trying to figure out ways that it's going to work for us. And I have to go back to something that Uwezo said too, that is really super important. And one thing that I stress with distance learning is communication. And it's whether it's a survey or whether it's an inventory. And it's an inventory of what they have, who's in the home, who's using it at that time, what is their individual situation. So not only communicating with that individual student, which will help build that relationship, but communicating with that family, reaching out in a very specific way to say, let's Zoom as a teacher with mom and dad or the guardian, or I'll pick up the phone and let's talk. Like, let's have a conversation. I don't want to just send it through an email. I want to talk to you. What is your situation? And while, you know, the grading was a big part of that, and I think that will help, I hope, engage and motivate some students through competition. You know, by having some structure of classes is fine, but I think understanding every student's situation, you know, we have this like make-believe time frame that kids have to graduate high school at 18 and go to college, and it's and really, like, it's it's an invisible line that we've just created. Like, so Kerry talked about, this is a whole new way of education, and so this is a whole new way of life. And so if we can reach those individual kids, and a lot of our professional development has been centered around that: social emotional wellness, communication, essential skills. You know, I've heard parents talk about, oh, well, this is a gap year. You know, kids will have to repeat this year because everything is virtual. And I just couldn't disagree with that more. There are so many teachers who are preparing themselves to the utmost level to transition and translate their classes in the best way possible. And trust me, we will bend over backwards to make sure every single child learns that and has has what they need. And so that's the professional development that's been going on all summer. It's strategy. I'll give you one strategy. So one of the things I've gotten some great feedback on has been my feedback for my online students and some of my high school students. I don't write feedback, and I'll tell you why. Students, especially in a virtual area where I can't see them and we can't discuss the writing, they will read the negative comments first, or the areas of improvement first, and they won't see the positive things that they did. Now, if I offer audio feedback and I'm like looking at their exact work on the screen, almost like I'm having a conversation with them, and I'm creating audio feedback, and I send them that audio file, they can listen to that while they're actually looking at their work. They can hear my inflection. They can hear my excitement. They can hear, this is where I think you can improve, Don, but this is where you really excelled. And they can hear that, and it's like I'm talking to them, even if I can at the moment. That audio feedback piece can be so important instead of just the written piece. And so there's been strategies like that all summer we've all been going through, and I think it's going to really benefit. And I just want everybody to know that I know, and I'm connected with teachers all over the country. We have not stopped working since March. We just haven't. We've been constantly trying to figure out ways that we can reach every single child with what it is that we teach. And if there was ever a time and place for every single grade level to say, I'm going to teach the whole child, I'm not just going to be a content expert, now is the time. And we have to do it.
Yeah, that always gets me. Yeah, I got chills there, Don, while you're talking to that idea that my job is to teach the content, not the kids. I think now we're seeing that shift and the opportunity that's coming up to hear every single voice. I love that you talk about that. And I didn't think about that, but you're right. That strategy of just your voice versus what you see on a text thread or on a chat, you can't pick up that inflection. If any of you have been on Facebook, it's this platform. It's a social media platform. I'm just joking. You guys know what it is. But if you've been on there lately, people like to really talk. I mean, anytime in the last several years, and you can't get inflection out of what they're saying. And so that makes it so much harder to really, as an adult even, to hear, like, are they being critical of me? Are they being, sarcastic? How does that actually work? So I love that you use that. Kerry, what about you in terms of your staff, preparing your staff, yourself, things that you're doing out there to get them ready for what's coming?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can make sure that we do is model the practices that we want our teachers to use with our students when we're designing their professional learning. Number one, Don, I think it honors the teachers as a whole person as well, and honors that they are learners just like their students are, and that if we're expecting them to build their own capacity, they need to feel as though all of their other needs are met. And so again, we're back to Maslow. But also one of those needs is getting meaningful feedback and having a meaningful relationship with their coaches and administrators and school leaders in a way that there is trust built, so that they know that if we're asking them to take great risks or do things they've never done before in the way that they're teaching, that we know that they're going to make mistakes and that we're going to have their back and we're going to provide supports, and we're going to have continuing ongoing opportunities for them to continue to grow and learn based on wherever they're starting from right now. And it doesn't matter where they're starting from right now, because we're there for them 100% of the time. So the first thing is to communicate that message. That's my primary goal right now as we're starting the year. And then to start, like I have a professional learning, a couple of optional sessions that I'm running next week. And the first thing that we're doing is an emotional check-in. Like, how are you doing? This is your first time back on campus since all of this started. So literally since March 12th, you have not physically been here. How does it feel to be here? You know, on a scale of green light, yellow light, red light, where are you right now? And that's how we're opening our time together before we even dive into the content or the pedagogy or the education theory, so that we're building trust in the room. Everybody feels comfortable sharing who they are. And I think that's important. But then additionally, it's establishing, I've actually been doing some consulting with some districts on how to design their professional learning programs in addition to designing our own in my school. And the process that I've worked through is, you know, it's based a lot on good old Simon Sinek and his golden circle, starting with what is the why for your district? What is the reason that we are embarking on this journey together and we're willing to innovate? Is it students at the center? Fine. But don't just say that because everybody says that. Say that because of who your students are, and identify what it is about your students that makes them special, right? And then make that your why. That's fine. Is your why something else? Is your why that we're going to use this as an opportunity for the schools to serve our students in a different way, to meet needs in a different way that we've never been able to before? Whatever it is, make sure that you establish that first, then talk about the how. And the how is not overwhelming people with a bunch of tools, but choosing some key tools that really allow those important relationships that we're all talking about to really flourish. So is there a tool that allows students to get assignments from teachers and turn them in, and also allows them, the students and teachers, to share a little bit of themselves in multiple ways, with their voices, like you said, Dawn, with video, with writing, like you said, Uwezo, so that, you know, we don't want tools that are sort of the jackknife of tools and they can do too many things, but we do want tools that do the important things and allow our students and teachers to share, you know, who they really are, because that's the foundation of everything. So that's what we're starting to do. We're creating professional learning that models that for our teachers, so that they will turn around and model that or do that with their students.
Whenever someone mentions the word tools, I know it immediately everyone starts thinking, like, what are the go-to tools? And I already see some people dropping it in the chat. So we'll pivot to that now. And not that this is a tool session. I mean, you can get a bunch of those online. There's lots of different tools you can use. And I see some of you sharing some in there. But specifically to what both Kerry and Don were talking about, and Nancy and Uwezo, in terms of that idea of hearing the voice, you know, what are some tools out there that teachers could be using to really capture that? And on the flip side of that, when it comes to professional learning, are there things that teachers are also doing that administrators are saying, I can really hear what you're thinking, what your process is, because it's not just the kids, but also the teachers. So are there some tools and strategies that you guys are using? I'll let Uwezo, you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I'll take that. And I just wanted to close out the last one for a second, because, you know, I also have kids at home. I have twins, and I have 3 kids at home in virtual remote school. And so as a parent, that's another thing that we're really trying to get into, is making whatever platform we use accessible and transparent to parents. And I think they're kind of lost out of the equation. Yeah. And in order to have an effective remote rollout, reaching out to parents and communicating with parents is essential. And that's really important. Being a parent to myself, that my kids' teachers reaching out to me was extremely beneficial and important, even though I'm an educator. But as far as tools, Bulb, amazing tool. And while we're here, I think every kid needs a digital portfolio. I believe in it wholeheartedly. During COVID, we were able to present resumes, present just different internships and just culminating activity for students to provide information and share information. And I think that you have kids like Don was saying, and some of the other panelists, some kids that were dormant during school, or kids that didn't socialize during school, or kids that were marginalized during school. And now in the COVID situation, in the comfort of their own home, they have something that they can work on at their own pace, individualize it, personalize it, and tailor it to themselves. And now they have the opportunity to share that. The excitement of sharing something like that is amazing. I remember doing a capstone presentation with a group of juniors. They were presenting a paper, and on this paper, just so happened that individuals from both joined the capstone presentation. And afterwards, the students, they hit me on social media. I know we spoke about social media. Thank you, Mr. Frazier, for the exposure. They were really excited to present that work and have people from around the country be involved. So when we're talking about networking right now as well, our culminating activity, we usually have people in the media center and professionals from here. They'll come and the kids will present their portfolios and talk about their information in front of them, and they'll have a grading sheet, a rubric to say how well they did. But now I can have Don on there, I can have Kerry, I can have Nancy, I can have yourself. We can have people from around the country go in and see that information. And now this tight-knit community now is global. And we're really preparing our kids to be a global citizen, because again, we're talking competition in the classroom, but it's competition in life too. They're competing with more than the people that are sitting in the classroom with them. Everyone wants to be successful. Everyone wants to achieve. So we need to be able to give them opportunities and access to information and tools that help them to succeed. And Bold was fantastic for me. And that's not because you invited me on here. It really worked for me.
I want you as my principal. I'm like charged up now. Like, let's go. Right. That is so true. So I also talk a lot about SAMR when I do presentations. And what you talked about really is that higher level, the SAMR model, which is redefinition, that idea that kids are creating and learning on their own. They're actually internalizing the learning. But then, as you said, they're sharing it to that outside voice, sharing it to the world. It's authentic. It's out there. And I love that idea that, that competition isn't just those kids in your class or in your school. You are competing against the world. Like, how do we separate ourselves, out there when we're trying to get into the workplace or trying to get to college? Kerry, you want to jump on this one too?
There's just so much energy in the chat right now that I want to talk about around digital portfolios. Like, it's interesting because it's something that has been tossed around in education for a while, but the reason it hasn't gone away is that, and I think the reason it hasn't been grabbed up by people and spread like wildfire like it should have been, is because it takes time, right? For students to develop something, work through iterations, make mistakes, polish it into something that they're really proud of. And by the way, the portfolio doesn't have to be all the perfect stuff, but the show pieces that are part of those conferences that you're talking about, Uwezo, that are part of what ends up being shared on Don's social media to his PLN, like those show pieces, they take time, and educators are always feeling so time crunched, and this year is going to be no exception. But the reason that there is so much energy behind digital portfolios is that it's an opportunity for students to, on their own, say, this is what I made, and this is how it represents who I am. And there is nothing that gets an educator more charged up than seeing a kid own his or her own learning and be able to speak about it and share it with excitement. And by the way, Uwezo, as you were talking about parents, that's what would get parents excited too. Like, to hear your own kid identify who they are and share something that they did is the best way for a school to build an alliance with parents for their student success. And a portfolio with a platform like Bulb, it allows you, it's not just a portfolio of papers. It's not just a portfolio of slide decks. It's not just a portfolio of videos. It's a portfolio of all of those things. And 1,000 more things, right? And we want our kids to be able to express themselves in a lot of different ways. So it's the direction we need to consider moving in.
And you said it takes a lot of time, Kerry. I think we just entered a time warp. I mean, I think now in education, we are fast forwarding to the future. I mean, we keep saying like, oh, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to figure this out. It's been 3 to 5 months, and now we're figuring it out. So maybe we needed this to kind of kick us in the pants, so to speak, because I think the portfolio piece specifically, when you talk about high stakes testing, which we'll talk about in a little bit, think about how much that is a representation of what a kid learns versus what you and Uwezo were just saying, like that does not represent them. It's that portfolio, it's their voice, it's the process, it's the product. Nancy, do you want to jump in on that too, about that idea of the portfolios? And I see a lot of good things in the chat too. You guys are blowing up the chat. Lots of different ideas out there. I love it.
I do, because I get really passionate about digital portfolios, and I could probably talk about it for this whole hour and a half. But one of the things I love about Bulb so much is that it has the flexibility to be all of the things, just like Kerry said. They can create a collection and make it private to themselves and just do their own reflection on what they're doing and what they know about, what they want to talk about in their own selves, something that maybe they want to reflect on, but they don't feel comfortable sharing yet. But then when they're ready to share it, they can move that page and put it somewhere else. Then they have that ability to showcase learning. Look at this thing that I did. I'm amazing. I'm an amazing person. This, that, the other. But my very favorite thing, well, two very favorite things, is the learning journey. And I have this story about my son, and I'm not going to brag on my son or anything, but like he struggles with other people being better at him at things, and he shuts down. So like he had a buddy who was a rock climber, and he went to a camp with him, and the kid was climbing up the immediately on the first day, climbing all the way up. Well, Braden struggled. He couldn't barely get up the first two things. He got scared. He was mad. He didn't want to go to camp. Well, by Friday, he was about 3/4 of the way up. So that whole time, he had gotten himself all the way up. But did he get all the way to the top like his friend? No. But what I did is we took videos of him in his learning process. So like on day 1, we took a video. On day 2, we took a video. And then on day 5, we took a video. We put day 1 and day 5 beside each other and put it on the portfolio for him. And he watched it. And he was like, because at first I said, well, how do you feel at camp? And he's like, well, not good, because I didn't get to the top. And then I stopped and I said, I want you to watch because I made it on his portfolio because he's young. And I said, I want you to look at your portfolio, and I want you to watch what you did on day 1 and what you did on day 5. And by the end of the video, he was like, oh, Mommy, I was learning. And I was like, well, gosh, you were. And he was like, I didn't get to the top, but Mommy, I did better than I did on day 1. And I was like, oh, because that is what a portfolio does for kids, is they start with day 1. What do I know about something? What do I not know about something? Then I document what I'm learning about something. And by the end of the page, I've got my showcase, and I can be like, look what I did, because I think sometimes kids forget that they're learning. And I think reflection on learning is so important, because it's part of the process. And if they can look back and be like, I just learned that, wow. I think that portfolios are just like the way to like the openness to being able to see that learning journey. And it really takes them that moment to go back and forth. And so if they're building these portfolios and they look back at kindergarten versus 5th grade, and I could get into my skipping example too, of like learning how to skip, like you don't know how to skip in kindergarten, and that video is a hot mess, but by 5th grade, you're skipping. And if you can look at both, and kids forget they didn't know how to walk. Kids forget they didn't know how to ride a bike. But if we can show them their learning process, they can be like, I learned how to do that. I'm going to keep learning. And the other thing I just want to touch on a little bit with digital portfolios is, now that things are getting more digital, less things are going home, less worksheets are going home, less things are happening. And parents are like, is my kid learning? And we're like, check your digital portfolio, because now all of a sudden you have a window to your kid's learning journey right there for you. And as a parent, watching and being able to get to a space where I can see my child learning and having aha moments, and it's all capsulated for me in basically a digital scrapbook, that is so amazing to me. And I think that's why I get so passionate about digital portfolios, because I think that if kids would take the time each day to document their learning, by the end of a month, they are going to see such progress that it's going to encourage them to keep moving and keep learning. It's just so amazing. I mean, I literally talk until 2 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m.
That was your espresso shot, man. Nancy just lit up on that one. And I love it that you used examples that were not necessarily writing. I know that people think, oh, language arts, you got to do your portfolio. That's part of it. But you talked about sports, you talked about just process. I mean, it could be any subject area. And I know that Don teaches in an area that has a lot of process when you talk about multimedia instruction. So I'm sure, Don, you've got some ideas around this too, because you've probably been doing some similar form of this for years in your class, but now the rest of us are kind of waking up to like, maybe it's good that we know the process too, not just the product.
So I have 2 points. I've instituted digital portfolios for my students probably for about 9 years now, and it is the single greatest addition to my classroom that I've ever added, period, with everything to just justify what Nancy said. And I'll take it a step further. I shared in the chat an example portfolio a student created. She's going to Tulane University to study medicine. However, she was one of my most creative video producers for creating sports media for our video scoreboard. So she put together a sports media portfolio, submitted it to the athletic director at Tulane, and said, if you're interested and you have people create content for the board, here's my portfolio. Guess what? He hired her. As a freshman now. So she's going to study medicine, but she loves video. So she's going to create video for the video scoreboard. And it was her portfolio with her videos, her written reflections, photos that she had taken, just a wide variety of content that showed her work. And I could bore you with hours about kids that got scholarships, that got internships, all because of their portfolio. There's one thing I want to mention too. So beyond the portfolio, you know me, I'm the video guy. I'm a big video guy. And I need to give a shout out to a good friend of mine, Steve Douglas, who's an Apple's distinguished educator in Lake Forest High School in Chicago. And I just got done doing a 2-week virtual workshop with him, with students. And we had them do video reflections. And what was really interesting was we had every student create a video in the beginning because they had a little bit of experience. And there was one student whose video was really average at best on week 1. Now, this was only a 2-week thing. On week 1, it was very average. And we gave her some tools of how you can really encapsulate your learning, capture your learning behind the scenes, really write a script, go through a whole process. And Steve has built out an entire reflection process. This is not just for video. He does this with his English 1 students, with his social studies students, and it has kids reflect on their learning. And by the Friday of the 2nd week, when the student showed her reflection video, it looked and sounded like a professional video. It was amazing how much she grew in a matter of like 8 days by being a sponge and listening, and then really being passionate about wanting to improve her craft. And now she has a video that she could submit. She's only going to be a junior, but she could submit this video to any company and probably get hired as like a social media coordinator or something. I mean, it was really powerful. So video is an amazing tool as well as the digital portfolio. So I'm going to share Steve's process because it will take a student and a teacher step by step by step. Here's how you prepare your script. Here are some images that you can add to it. And it really takes the student through the process and forces them to reflect on what it is that they've learned. And then it's that visual video component that kids love and that's so attractive, and also in a virtual world can help us connect with our students and allow them to use their voice. And every kid is at a different spot. You know, there was one of the things talking about tools, you know, the phone. Whatever device, you know, take out like a voice memo, open up QuickTime Movie, GarageBand, Audacity, whatever, and just hit record. And I just want to hear from that student, like, what's your voice? Tell me what you've learned. Tell me where you're struggling. Tell me what you're wondering about. Tell me 3, you know, successes you had this week, and send in an audio file. Just, you know, I don't even need to see your face. The kid that doesn't want to show their face, that's okay. But I want to hear from your voice. It's having that personal, like one-on-one conference. And so there are a million tools, and it's almost like, you know, wanting a drink of water out of a water fountain, getting sprayed with a fire hose. So pick like 2 or 3 that you really like. I've added a few to the chat. I know others have as well. But as a teacher, a classroom teacher, I would recommend finding 2 or 3 apps or web-based programs that you're going to master or that you're going to offer the kids to master and that you'll support. And then offer the option to the students, if there are others that are out there, if you like Bulb or you like video or you like this, go for it. I might not be able to support it. YouTube can probably support it for you with a tutorial. But like, give them the option. Like, I don't care what the tool is. Just tell me your story. Tell me your learning. Show me your learning, and kind of go from there.
And you just touched on one of the two, what I would say, most popular teachers in the United States, right? Google and YouTube. Yeah, those are the top two there. Nancy, I know. Before we close up, because the finger's out. She's like, wait, 1 minute. I got to just a little. All right, give us another little bit point on that, and then we're going to get to our final question here.
Yeah, just little nibbit. I just was thinking about is someone had wrote it in the chat, and I was like, oh, yes, I need to share this. Is teachers need to reflect on their learning process, especially right now. And the digital portfolio is the perfect place. So we actually put out like a reflection template for teachers at the end of the school year, because we wanted them to realize, just like what Braden needed to realize, is that they have just leaps and bounds grown, and they all grew in their own way, but they need to celebrate that. So we did these like celebration webinars at the end of the school year where teachers came on and talked about like what they learned and what they want to take back to the classroom next year, before we knew, everyone was hoping that we'd have the school year. And I just wanted to say that I think the greatest modeling is, one, having a teacher walk through their own learning process and think about it and grab screenshots of what they've learned and kind of keep that in together in a professional portfolio. So I just wanted to throw that out there as like, our kids definitely, but like, I think one of the hidden gems is that getting our teachers to do that same reflection on their learning process so that they can continue to build themselves up and realize where they came from, because everybody is learning and growing. And if there's someone in education that could stop and say they haven't learned something since March 16th, I'd like to talk to them, because I can't imagine, it doesn't matter what position you're in, you have learned so much over these past 6 months, 5 months, whatever it is. I just want to put that in there. Teachers, yay. Educators,
I love it.
Yay.
Yeah, it's true. There is no ceiling on excellence, right? And that's the one thing we need to continue to think about with our own teachers. I don't care if you've been teaching 1 year or 40 years, there's always an opportunity to grow. And I think, in our state, we actually changed some of the models of like how you actually evaluate teachers. Because when I used to be a teacher in a classroom, it was the proficiency model, right? Check a box, you touch the tech, you touch the smart board, you must be a tech person. Versus the growth model, which I think is even better. And what you're hitting on, Nancy, there is like, let's talk about what is a goal of something I want to grow in, how am I going to demonstrate that growth, and then how am I going to show that I actually was able to achieve it right at the end. So I think that's another part of that process that we often leave out, but I do love that you brought that up there. So I'm gonna close this out with a final question here, because I think this one is a big one. I want to give each of you an opportunity to really hit on it. This is the new normal, which is like the buzzword of buzzwords. I feel like if it's a drinking game, I'd be drunk by noon. But what are some of the things that you think that we've learned? And a lot of you have hit on these already. So I want you to kind of think about those ideas and thoughts of ways that are helping kids with their voice, helping teachers with their learning. What are some of the things that we've learned over the course of this pandemic that you think that after everything returns, let's say, quote unquote, back to normal, and we're back into the everyday in-person classroom, what are some things that we should keep from this experience to continue to bridge forward with our students? So I'll let, who would like to go first on that one?
I'm on
Uwezo,
mute.
you got it?
I'll take it.
Go for it.
For me, and I think I speak for everyone in the chat and all the panelists, I'm going to be extremely transparent here. I am not the same person that I was after March 13th. Nowhere near the same. I am not the same person. But what I try to carry in this and to this new school year, and I'm going to be short, but I hope is impactful, is that I don't want to have so much anxiety about the future or so much apprehensiveness about the struggle that took place in March that I can't look at right now and be optimistic about it and try to put the best product possible for my students and try to have a great mindset to go out and do this work, because it's really important. And again, with so many things taking place and things becoming politicized and all of those things, it's really easy to lose focus on why we're here and why we joined this profession, which is children. And once you lose that perspective, then things usually go downhill from there. So I really want to stay grounded, and I hope everyone, has a great year, but I hope that you don't look so far in the future and don't, harp on what happened before, and you deal with the now. And I think that's really important for me moving forward. And I think that's a great message that I'm really trying to instill into my staff.
I love that. I think you're right on point. The buildings exist for the kids. They don't exist for the adults, right? That's why we do what we do. Thank you, Uwezo, for that. Kerry, what about you? What are some things you think as we go forward, what are some tools, techniques, strategies, ideas that we should continue on forward as we go back into what normal school would hopefully look like?
Yeah, I think all of us in education had to come up with a solution in a pinch, right? And have the option of not doing school was never an option, right? And so we came up with solutions, and in most cases, and this was true for my school, and I know it was true for many other districts and schools, between that March 12th, 15th date, and in New England we don't finish school until the end of June, right? So June 20 whatever, most districts or schools went through 2 or 3 iterations, right? So we were completely solution oriented, and when something didn't work, we didn't say, oh, we give up. We came up with another better solution based on the data. And I think that's like the secret sauce. I think we need to remember that just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. And just because you don't get it right the first time doesn't mean you aren't going to do better. And that mindset is going to serve us well as we move forward with our students, and modeling that for our kids and being able to say to them, like, all right, we tried this. As we launch our school year, there's all this hemming and hawing about whether we're doing it right. Who cares? Just do it and then continue to improve it and do better and better. And if we can model that and show that flexibility and that positive forward thinking mindset for our students, we're going to be raising the best generation of kids ever coming out of this.
That is right on point. Perfection is the enemy of done, right? You can't wait till it's perfect. You have to go forward with whatever it is you have. And then I like that you said, use that modeling and actually explain to the kids too, that, hey guys, I'm trying this out. Let's see if we can figure this out. Your words are so important and so impactful that if you get up there and you start saying, oh, this stupid technology doesn't, the kids pick up on that. So being able to say, like, we're trying this together and let's go, and they lean in, right? They want to help when they hear you doing that. Don, what about you? What are some walkaways with you?
I just think, continue being real, be who you are, whether you're in person or online as an instructor, as a teacher. I think maintaining and really celebrating the relationships of your colleagues, and hopefully having administrators really trust that we are professionals, that we will do whatever it takes. And then just offering not only our students, but our families and our communities grace, and really not racing to a finish line, and understanding that this is a great time for mastery and for ways to revolutionize education. And through that process, just offer everyone some grace, because we don't know what that individual's going through. We don't when they walk in our classroom, and we are more hypersensitive and aware right now because of health and because of everything, like Uwezo mentioned. And if we take the approach of grace and seeking to understand, and then realizing that it's not a race to the finish and that this can be a process. It doesn't have to be, I give an instruction, a project, and it's one and done. Maybe we offer a little more revision, like we do in some other classes, like revision is okay. A one and done method really is not possible, I think, in this environment. And I think colleges are looking at that, by suspending, some of the standardized testing and everything that we talked about with different ways for students to show their learning, rather than through a standardized test and rather than through a pop quiz. And while some of those lessons can be important, I guess, I'm just going to continue to offer everyone grace, whoever I come in contact with, and seek to understand them and know that it's not a personal attack on me if something goes wrong, but I will personally make sure that I do everything I can to create a solution or an environment that's conducive to success.
It's an important message for those of you that are out there that are educators that are listening now, and in your community. We talked about this at the very beginning. Maybe you're getting beat up on social media right now because, you know, parents are upset that teachers don't want to go back or whatever. I think continue to focus on that. Think about that grace and give yourself that ability to say, I'm going to breathe. We're going to move forward. We're going to think about those kids again, and that'll continue to be our focus, because that's just noise when it comes down to the actual learning. Nancy, what about you? You want to wrap us up on this one? I know she's typing in some stuff too there. Oh, you got muted?
All of a sudden my AirPod went out right as you were talking, and I'm like, he's coming to me.
We did that on purpose, everybody, because you know that when you do this in real life, that there will be things like this that happen, and we wanted to model that technology will fail.
The panic. Okay.
You got it.
Mine's pretty short, just because y'all have said all the wonderful things, but the one thing I just want to key into is better together. I think one of the things that we learned as a district and as a community of educators is that we do this better together. We have the Twitter sharing went out the roof, with all teachers going, this is the stuff I'm doing, check this out, I'm trying this, and I'm doing this, and this might work for you. And we were just like it was just like crazy. Like my Twitter was off the charts. But then even inside of our district, teachers began across the district saying, I'll do this, you do that, we'll share it, we'll put it in a spot, we'll do this together. And like my son, and I get goosey bumps because, you know, I work with teachers all over the district, and I know them, but my son doesn't know them. But all of a sudden he's seeing faces, like friends of mine, that are teaching him how to do his writing and how to do all these different things. And that was because the teachers got together and they realized they're better together. So instead of me just doing all my stuff by myself in my classroom, I'm depending on my team, I'm depending on the other teachers that teach this, and I'm depending on the teacher in New Jersey or the teacher in California who had a great idea, and I was able to benefit from it. My kids were able to benefit from it. I just cannot, what I get so full of, I don't like COVID, so don't take this the wrong way, like I love COVID, but I feel like what COVID did for us is joined us together as a band of educators that were just doing this for kids. And we got together and we're like, I need help, we need help, we all need help, let's help each other. And I get so goosey bump when I think about all the things that teachers have done for each other and our administrators have done for their teachers. It's just better together is what I would say, what we should keep doing. No matter if we're in a pandemic or not, we need to keep doing this together and keep sharing and saying like, look what I did, you should try it with your kids, because the only people that are going to benefit from that, well, not only, but the main people that are going to benefit from that are our children across the nation, across the world. And then again, like Kerry said, it then builds us to a better future. Like, oh my gosh, it's just so cool. So that's what I would say.
Well, I rarely have opportunities to get my bucket filled. My bucket has been filled today. Thank you so much. These are these amazing panelists, Uwezo, Kerry, Don, Nancy. You guys can see right there where their Twitter handles are there at the bottom. You can follow Uwezo at PR7601. I'll have to ask you about that story later, Uwezo, why that's your handle. It's an interesting one, I'm sure. Kerry Hawk 02 is where you can find Kerry and her great work on Twitter. Also, Don Goble is dgoble2001. And then Nancy at Garvey on Twitter. So please, please, please give them a chance to follow. I want to thank all the panelists today. I want to thank Bulb for this opportunity to be a part of this amazing thought leader think tank. And hopefully we'll be able to capture all the things we had in our chat, but also post it online. Stay tuned. This video will be posted later on YouTube as well, because of course, like we just said, we want to go back and revisit. We want to get that message out there. We want to have an opportunity to follow up. So thank you for those of you in the chat as well for participating today. And thank you again, all panelists.